What's up everyone and welcome back to another PoE economics video. So today we take a look at this cast on crit and cast on elemental ailment, spark, comet, sorcerer build. The first thing that you will have to realize is that this is not a starter build. It is very budget friendly since we're not using temporalis or any of the other very expensive endgame items, but it requires some initial currency to get this working. Now, if you're struggling a lot with getting currency in PoE, I highly recommend to check out the Discord server as well as the website in the video description. There are quite a lot of things and systems there that can help you out getting a lot of currency. Now, starting off with the build, we want to first look at what items I've got equipped. And after that, we will talk about the skill tree and the gems, and finally how you start it up. So first off, you can see we're using quite a few uniques: the Adonis Ego Siphoning Wand, and with it the Malagaros Virtuosity Find Braces. Now the reason why we're using these two is pretty obvious. We're first off getting Pinnacle of Power from the Adonias, and then we're getting a ton of critical hit chance from the Malagaros. So you can, for example, replace this wand by getting this unique effect on a rune with a normal wand, but that would cost us maybe 1,500 divines for a really good wand, and it is not required. So in this build, this wand will be kept right here, but just if you want to have an upgrade after you got everything else figured out. Next, we're obviously using the Headhunter Heavy Belt. As you can see, you don't have to use it, but it is very powerful and helps a lot with clear times, as well as in some very hard maps also adds a ton of survivability that we don't necessarily need, but is very nice to have. Next, we got Calandra's Touch Ring, which we're using because we have another really powerful ring. And then we're using the Nascent Hope Thawing Charm, the Fall of the Exiver Charm, and a Rite of Passage Golden Charm. These are again not necessary to get this build working, but obviously things like Rite of Passage always help out with damage, and these two always help out with survivability. You will see that these are on quite a lot of builds. There's more uniques that are part of this build, but those are jewels in the passive tree, so let's get the items done first. For the helmet, we're using a Kamasan's Tiara for the S. We obviously also have critical hit chance on it, which helps out a ton, and there are quite a lot of other things on here that are pretty obvious for a helmet and help us out, like resistances. Not really anything special. The same also goes for our body armor. This is pretty obvious stuff. You can just pause the video here and look through it. Same thing for our boots. We want movement speed, ES, and resistances. Those are the boring items of the build. What is really interesting is the amulet that we're using. Fabgun recently made a video on crafting this type of amulet, obviously with a different implicit since we're using cast on elemental ailment here, but that basically means that prices for this amulet got a lot cheaper than before, so you can get a very good +4 to level 4 spell skills, mana, cast speed, and spirit amulet, like you can see right here, for very cheap. For the allocation, we're using Dominion, and this is very important because it allows us to upkeep the Archon buff 100% of the time. Now, to make this work, you will also need a scepter that has the maximum number of elemental infusions, and the rest of these stats are kind of irrelevant, but you can see spirit as a modifier here and an implicit. For our secondary, we're using a chiming staff, which gets a sigil of power, but that is not really the highlight because here we're basically just using the secondary weapon set to get all of our elemental infusions that we can then convert to power charges. So the staff is not really that important, and rather more important to get the setup working. Now let's do the passive tree and the jewels. First off, we're going for Strike Twice, Refracted Infusion, Tempest Caller, and Storm's Recollection in the Ascendancy. And then for the skills, I think it is pretty obvious. I'm just going to hover over it a bit so you can kind of just pause the video and see what exact things you need to choose. Obviously, this kind of stuff will also be in the build link in the video description, so you can copy it more easily, but let's go over the jewels nonetheless. First off, we have the Megalomaniac Diamond with multitasking and Madness of the Bones. Then to the left of it, we have the From Nothing Diamond with Eldritch Battery, and to the right over here, we have a Time Lost Sapphire with a very large radius and a ton of critical hit chance. The last jewel is the Controlled Metamorphosis Metamorphosis diamond, which allows us to select the conservative casting as well as harmonic generator nodes. Now I won't get too much into detail on why I have chosen which specific node at what specific point. You just have to get the basics down, like for example getting mind over matter and getting the right jewels. The most important thing is that you just understand how the build works, which we'll go over in a minute. But first, let's do the skill jumps. And since we have quite a lot, as you can see, rather than going over every single support gem and modifier, I'm just going to expand the section for each of the skills so you can see what weapon skill we have selected, as well as hover each and every single one of the support gems. So you can just pause the video and copy the exact setup. If you want to read through the exact effects, you can always just go to the build link in the video description, where you can see all of these things as well. Now, starting off, we're using Elemental Storm. Then we're using Power Siphon, Pinnacle of Power, Discipline, Sigil of Power, Cast on Elemental Ailment, Spark, Frost Bomb, Cast on Critical, Cast on Elemental Ailment, Mana Remnants, Firestorm, Archmage, Mana Tempest, and Arctic Armor. Now, after you have the items, the passive tree, and the skill jumps, you just want to understand how to set this build up so you're doing the maximum amount of damage. Now, the first thing that you will have to realize is that we're using two different weapon sets here, where in one weapon set we're gaining all of our infusions and power charges, and in the other we're gaining all of our damage and cast on critical. The first of which being the secondary weapon set, where we can just activate our Frost Bomb, then our Firestorm, where you can see we're gaining a ton of power charges from. You just have to repeat the Frost Bomb and Firestorm as long as it takes to get 7 power charges, and then you manually switch with X to your first weapon set and activate the Pinnacle of Power to get the Pinnacle of Power effect. And now you are ready to go and you can do a shit ton of damage. Just have to watch out while casting Spark that you don't use up all of your mana, but if there's at least one enemy or even multiple enemies, that doesn't really happen. And to gain some extra damage, you can always activate Mana Tempest or Sigil of Power. And of course, placing a Frost Bomb from time to time also gives you some extra damage, though all of that is not really required. You can also just run through the map and just press left click until your Pinnacle of Power effect disappears. And then you'll have to gain your power charges again with R and E, so the Frost Bomb and Firestorm, and then just switch to your first weapon set and do the Pinnacle of Power again, and the effect refreshes. So that's all for this build. Now, don't forget to join the Discord if you have any questions or you are curious about the things that we have to offer there. And as always, thank you to all people who are supporting this channel with the memberships on the website, and I'll be seeing you guys in the next one.